Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with us tonight for this special event. My name is Terry Kihu. I'm the Writing Programs Manager at the Center. And on behalf of the Center and my colleagues and our board, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first reading by our 2020 Emerging Writer Fellows. 2020 marked an important milestone for the Center for Fiction as we turned 200 years old. The Center was founded in Manhattan in 1820 as a mercantile library, and we transitioned to our current name in 2005. 2 years ago, we opened the doors to our current home in Brooklyn and remained the only organization in the United States devoted solely to the art of fiction, an art form my colleagues and I work every day to help keep alive and thriving. As we all know, 2020 also marked a very difficult year for many individuals and families and countless nonprofit organizations throughout the country. I'd like to take this opportunity to give special thanks to the Jerome Foundation, the Amazon Literary Partnership, the Horace W. Goldsmith Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council for their continued support of the fellowship program. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also take this opportunity to thank our members, bookstore patrons, students and instructors, individual donors, volunteer readers, staff, and any other group I may have missed. You've helped us stay alive during this last year, and we wouldn't be here tonight without all of your support. And so here we are, now in year 10 of this amazing program, which since 2011 has supported 89 writers at critical stages of their literary careers. The Emerging Writer Fellowship supports early career writers residing within the 5 boroughs of New York City who show promise of literary excellence. In addition to a $5,000 stipend and use of our writer studio, fellows have the opportunity to meet with editors, agents, and authors through a series of monthly talks and are paired with an experienced editor for revisions on a novel or story collection in progress. Every group of fellows is unique and special to us. And this year, we're especially excited to welcome these 9 writers who were selected from a pool of over 870 applicants, the most ever in the fellowship's history. Tonight's event, the first of 2 readings by our fellows during their fellowship, is a treat for all of us, an opportunity for these 9 talented scribes to share their work and for you and I to experience the art that we proudly celebrate here at the Center, fiction. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our 2020 Emerging Writer Fellows. They'll each be reading for about 5 minutes in alphabetical order by last name. After the reading, please stick around for a few brief fellowship-related announcements. That said, and without further ado, our first reader of the evening, originally from the Bronx, New York, please welcome Raluca Albu.
Thank you. It's really special to be here tonight. And I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm excited that we get to finally hear each other, because this is the first time we're going to also encounter each other's work as fellows. So that's a special point of the night for me. I'll be reading from A Novel in Progress, which is about an illegal abortion doctor in communist Romania. This topic interested me, especially because I was born in Romania and my parents and we left illegally because of the regime. And one of the draconian elements of that regime was its anti-abortion, anti-contraception policy. And those rules were not set up for any like moral reason or questions about life or conception or any of that, but mostly to increase the population, to create more subjects for the state. And children were considered property of the state. And I was really fascinated by the idea of women living through that, and the women who did get to live through that, and those who didn't, and the kind of person who would risk their life and safety to become a doctor in that context. And also how, even the heroic can be complicated and complex. So the excerpt I'm reading is from a secret police file fictionalized secret police file that is written about this woman. And it's one of her confessions. And her name is Roxana. The illegal abortions interest you. How boring. Come now, Bogdan. I've done things you don't have laws for, things that would put the futility of these decrees to shame. To get the sweet strawberries, you need that bitter worm shit. But if you want to hear about my crimes, I'll tell you about my crimes. But it happened way before the still night in question, before the curettages, before we turned those boats into hospital rooms, before I knew that fish have air bladders. When Ceausescu issued his decree, I was 1 year out of high school, employed as a teacher's assistant while studying for my college entrance exam. I had no interest in working with children, but it was a better option than working at the pork factory and coming home smelling like exposed intestines. Barely a woman yet, I was ignorant of this law's tenets, and I wasn't inventive enough to imagine its worst incarnations. The menstrual police showed up during my favorite lesson of the year. Miss Francesca was preparing the class for the fish dissections. The students were all dressed in their usual paper crisp uniforms, blood red neckties, white pom-poms that looked like flowery tumors shooting out of their temples. They sat in those repurposed church pews, the ones made from the demolished homes of the former bourgeoisie. They love to tell us that. Cousins of yours, probably. That's how you Kulak offspring protect yourselves, isn't it? You become the police so they don't fleece you. It's the natural thing to do. I feel like I need a cigarette while I'm reading this. It was a bright day, I remember that. The September sun announced itself through the wall of windows, shooting light over the hand-drawn anatomy posters on the other side of the room. Before the school year started, I helped Miss Francesca draw some of them. Not the one of the human heart. It's not that I didn't try. I did, but she didn't like it. It was too pretty, she said. Your arteries look like tree branches. This is an ugly organ, an overripe tomato, saggy and violet, the kind no one would ever eat. I tried to sketch it again. Now it's too ugly. It looks like a diseased testicle. She had me draw the kidneys instead. Easier, she said, like a potato screwed a cherry. So there it was, shining down on me, the potato that screwed the cherry. The classroom smelled like the glycerin they used to clean the floors, a smell, something like being nowhere. I lived, oops, sorry, scrolling too fast. I loved interrupting that smell, walking up and down the room, plopping dead, still defrosting fish onto the plastic dissection mats. Boys and girls alike winced at the fish juice as it splashed on them. A few were stoic, as they should have been. Corvine clapped, but he clapped at everything. I think it was a sickness. The other teacher's assistant, Suzette, stapled handouts at the teacher's desk. Every time the metal hit the page, my jaw clenched. Suzette. We were not friends. She was 2 years older, also a teacher's assistant. I was mostly invisible to her when we were school children, and she was too visible to me. It was her heart poster that Miss Francesca chose to hang. Suzette was not just a perfectionist. She was just perfect. She wore her corn blonde hair in pulpy braids that reminded me of Easter bread, with, it's delicious, but only in moderation. Meanwhile, my hair was roach brown, frayed like old hay. She was skinny, like we all were, but she had sturdy collarbones, expansive like seagull wings. I imagined boys hanging from them, treating her chest like a jungle gym. And now I'm confusing my metaphors. That is what she did to my brain. I drowned out Suzette's stapling cacophony by stepping loudly across the classroom, feeling my foot against the floorboards. The fish crate was heavy and I was eager to empty it. I laid the last fish down on a student's plate. It was the student Miss Francesca asked me to keep an eye on, Maria. She was misbehaving, refusing to answer questions. One of her parents had been arrested, so it wouldn't be much longer that she too would stay with us. We knew the process, the seasons of depersonalization. I mean, that's not how I saw it then. I didn't even know to ask any questions. We were village people. The forced migrations hadn't started yet. We were living through the golden era. And I don't know how you boys find your loyalty. You don't even know what it's like when it's good. Ceausescu's takeover only preoccupied me to the extent that I thought he looked like something between a half-born fetus and a slippery eel. He was young, dopey, and we were told he hated the Soviets and that he created his own communism. That American president even visited us, the crook who said he was not a crook. Ceausescu's forebearers had been more vicious than the rest. I plopped the fish down on the plate and then decided to work on my own dissection right next to them. My fish was larger than the others, and I wondered at the size of its guts. I'd only seen the insides of cooked fish. My mother spared me this part. I always chose the other chores, dusting books, sewing pillowcases, watering the garden. The food felt too personal somehow, too of myself, something for someone else. I ran the knife blade against the stiff, thin underbelly of the ice fish. The cut was smooth and easy. I pulled back its gelatinous skin and reveled in the surreal landscape of its digested organs. A moon-like gallbladder, an acorn of a liver, a plush pond of a gonad. The heart was red and prickly, like a cat tongue. Right beside it, a row of gills, and I squeezed them between my fingers. As we cut, there was a knock on the door. 3 men walked in, one with a clipboard, another with thread for lips, the third probably just as hideous. The one with the clipboard for tits said they were there to conduct the gynecological health exam. And then he read 2 names, mine and Suzette's. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Raluca. That was great. Up next, from Chicago, please welcome Rakin Azfar.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for showing up. I'm going to be reading from a collection of short stories that I've been working on. This story involves a pair of addicts walking around a suburban neighborhood looking for something to steal. This whole town was comprised of poorly designed houses, blown out of proportion to everything but each other. But the drive curved elegantly westward in a way that pleased Saeed when he would run circuits around this block as a teenager. A slow, downward arc that he associated with a brief respite and marked by a large hump of cement in front of the Rivas Gupta Anderson cluster that was hoped to host water balloon fights and innumerable skinned knees. Nasser didn't know that Saeed had grown up down the block, nor did he need to know. They were dope friends who had happened to know each other from Sunday school, and both retained the unspoken desire not to expand that relationship past that, and hopefully de-escalate it when they decided to get clean. It was cold. The sun's warmth traveled slower than its light. It would not touch them for hours. They walked cement streets that curled and swelled into cul-de-sacs, expanding away from each other like a network of nerves. The moon shone and fought for relevance behind budding branches and impervious clouds. He only had to make it through this night. He was good about sleeping off the nausea for a bit. A palliative sleep, dreamless. Nasser followed Saeed along the street's curve, looking for another car to hit. It wasn't smart to hit neighboring houses. Prying eyes get excited at being included in the drama, and people like that can't be accounted for. We shouldn't hit the next house. Let's go a little farther, bro, Nasser said. They walked along Edgerton as it turned into Rachel. Saeed noticed the different styles of lawns, some impeccably kept, as if warding off the alien disorder of the lawns of their neighbors, run through with weeds and grass of varying height. The patchwork quality of the lawns broke whatever sense of uniformity Saeed was obligated to feel. What do you think about this one? He asked. A truck, American made. He could smell a layer of dust lining the bed. These were good for a shot. Usually you'd catch them in the middle of a workers' comp situation, or afterward, when it grew out into the street. You were liable to find a bottle or a bag, but either way, they were keeping a secret from a wife in the glove compartment. But they were also most likely to sleep with a gun on them. Before Saeed could remember if Aaron DeAngelis carried, Nasser had his hand on the door. Moonlight peeked past the chimney and did his looks more justice than the ember of a cigarette. Curly hair, Arab hair, that hung in a heavy bunch around the nape of his neck, straining the roots. The drugs had eaten away the softnesses in his face, throwing the craters and scars of his adolescence into relief on his skin and accentuating his large nose. He would have been some other place's platonic ideal of handsome, a bust before the common era and the wear of time, if not for the desperation in his eyes before the door gave. Saeed could see his look of astonished joy, which made him look even less distinguished. He scurried over. "Fuck yeah, dude," said Nasser. Saeed contained his enthusiasm. "Don't get hard until you've actually got something, else you'll feel worse than before." Nasser didn't mind the tutelage. Saeed was the only one of the two that kept a score of the fact that Nasser had introduced him to pills. Since then, the two had engaged in a rat race that had culminated in Saeed injecting Nasser for the first time last month. Saeed went to the other side of the car and helped search. The truck exuded a familiar, not unpleasant odor of cigarettes and dogs. "It's messy as shit in here," Nasser said, reaching his hand into a Doritos bag. "But it's the people that treat it like a second house that always turn up something." They shuffled through Aaron's effects, waiting for the pills to bolster the delusion that their congregation was due to anything but pretense. Nasser started telling a story about his girlfriend. Saeed couldn't remember if he had told it before, but it wouldn't surprise him if he had. He didn't latch on to every errant exchange the way he used to. He used to pride himself on this quality, how he could function as a repository of other people's memories. He had such a good recall of their lives that he would have to suppress it at times, let people repeat themselves and not correct them on the minutia of their own experiences, just to not appear too interested and possibly call attention to the little spaces within himself that he was saturating with the colors he saw in other people. Now he didn't think much outside of himself, or more so a conception of himself within the confines of a limited time frame. An anxious, obverse Zen state that kept him fixated on the present moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakin. Our next reader, originally from Seattle, Washington, please welcome Ian Denning.
Hi, thank you, Terry, and thanks for everybody for making it out tonight. So I'm using my time at the fellowship to polish off a literary horror novel, but tonight I am reading the beginning of a short story called The Frog. It goes like this. I only talked to my brother about the woman in the ground once, years later. I was visiting him to celebrate his first post-college job and apartment. Both were shitty. A software sales associate position and a fifth-story walk-up in a bad part of the city, but they were Cal's and they were firsts. So he invited his big sister in from out of town to toast his good fortune. We ate vindaloo and drank cheap beer at the Indian place on the corner. Back at his apartment, we shared a joint on his death trap fire escape. Sitting on his windowsill, I could look across a littered courtyard and into the windows of the next building over. Couples made dinner in their kitchens. Men watched TV in the dark, limed orange by Sports Center. The city made me feel small, and I liked that. I didn't see Cal often, and I wanted to talk about Mom, but my family had always papered over the hard conversations with easier ones. So instead, Cal and I drank more and talked about our old high school. We turned on the Spanish language channel, the only station his TV picked up, and made up the plot of a movie we couldn't understand. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, it was the middle of the night. There was a new movie on, some forgotten Spanish horror flick, uncanny in the way of old B movies, bad lighting and garish makeup, and actors who looked like everyday people. In a stone room, a caped man stood behind a woman, shadows occluding his face. He gripped her shoulders, and she looked back at him, her mouth twisted, eyes white. The woman begged, but the man only laughed. She was paralyzed with fear, or else it was meant to be a tableau. I looked from the screen to Cal. He was half asleep, a bottle hanging loose in his hand. The woman in the movie screamed. Those actors were dead now, I thought, and the technicians who ran the cameras, and the servers who catered lunch for the crew, and the chemists who processed the film, all gone. I think that's why I asked him about the woman in the ground, because one day I would be dead too, and Cal, and if I couldn't talk about Mom, then I had to talk about something. Do you remember the frog? I asked. I couldn't bring myself to call it what it was. What frog? He said without turning to me. In the swamp at the lake house we went to with Dad? At first I thought he hadn't heard me, but then he nodded. My skin prickled. I had not dreamed it. It had happened. Cal had seen it too. The city lay outside, all those people sleeping and eating, moving back and forth in their rooms. I felt like I had pushed through the door of a dining room, the table set years ago, and something was coming very fast from a great distance away to meet me. I said, I've never stopped trying to figure that out. Again, Cal took a long time to respond. Finally, he said, me neither, and a minute later, he had drifted off. I was electric with his acknowledgement of it. I couldn't sleep thinking about that week at the lake house. When Cal finally woke up and stumbled to bed, I lay awake and stiff as a plank under his childhood comforter, listening to the traffic and imagining each car was a crackling leaf in an endless wood. It happened the rainy December when Mom moved out. Dad drove me, Cal, and Cal's friend Dylan north of our house to a lake house in the woods. We arrived just before sunset, headlights crawling across a house so dark it looked abandoned. While Cal and Dylan ran circles around the station wagon and jumped from the porch onto the soft, sodden lawn, Dad pulled his old army compass out of the glove box and gave us the lay of the land. The lake lay to the north, the mountains beyond it. To the west were 300 yards of deep woods, and then the neighbor's house, closed up for the winter. To the east, a swamp, land too damp to build vacation homes on. There was a lone bullfrog croaking out in the swamp, a basso profundo squawk. Cal and Dylan snatched the compass and ran around the side of the house to explore. It was just Dad and I. Time to get the car unloaded, he said, without looking at me. When we watched movies together and something scary happened, Dad would clap his hands over my eyes like I was still a little kid. Pay no attention to the awful thing happening in front of you. Being at the Slake House was like that, a misdirection. Cover your eyes. Ignore the fact that your mother is no longer your mother, that by the time we return home, she will be gone. The house was as rustic and dank as a stone pulled out of a mudflat. Ragged hunting trophies and fishing gear from bygone decades decorated the living room. The wood paneling swelled and buckled away from the walls. My room, and I picked the biggest room in the house since I was flush with self-pity, overlooked the lake and the little boathouse and the dead grass tufting up through the planks of the back deck. And even upstairs I could hear, rising low from the swamp and rolling across the flat of the water, the frog and its night song. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Our next reader, born and raised in Malaysia, and now calls Brooklyn home. Please welcome Grace Liew.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm going to read from a short story called Perfect 10. Sarah Zhang was meeting Ken for the first time. She didn't know his last name. They had met on a website for sugar daddies, and he wanted to see her in person before disclosing his full identity, make sure she was real and all. Until last week, Sarah had no idea a site like that even existed. She learned about it from the New York Post. A woman's sugar daddy had put her through law school, then bought her a bar as a graduation gift. Her law degree ended up being an expensive piece of decor on the bar's wall. At the restaurant, Sarah spotted Ken right away. He was sitting by the window, tapping on his phone, which he held at a full arm's length with one pointed index finger. He looked so much older than his photos. Ken shot to his feet when he saw her. Hi, any trouble getting here? Sarah smiled. Sorry to keep you waiting. She tipped on her toes and touched her cheek to Ken's. He smelled like fresh laundry detergent. Okay, that's a start. The trick was to focus on the positives, away from his hairline, which swept so far back that his forehead jutted forward like an island. He had catfished her with photos from several inches of hairline ago. He swept a full scan down her body, then squeezed her hand before settling back in his chair. You looked even better in person, sweetheart. Excuse me. Seeing him in the flesh, so obviously lacking, made Sarah feel very defensive. So, she said, I was working for a startup until last week. Cool, Ken said. What's the company? I don't want to say, Sarah said. Privacy reasons. Actually, she was embarrassed to say more. No one had even heard of the social media app she worked for, grasping weekly at market share from Instagram. Week after week, she found herself posting listicles and e-commerce roundup links until she couldn't do it anymore. The point was, she was meant for something more meaningful, not writing clickbait digital content. She'd only brought it up to let Ken know that he was irrelevant. Right, sorry. Ken popped an olive in his mouth. I didn't mean to pry. Not at all, Sarah faked a chuckle. I left at the right time anyway. They turned gross. Gross? Ken asked. Yeah, now their shtick is to write anti-feminist crap, Breitbart, red pill stuff, you know? Think women are inferior to men. Ken shook his head and swirled his wine glass in slow motion before bringing it to his lips. Well, Sarah continued, it totally worked for them. Now their stuff is always viral, more app downloads than ever. People like drama, I guess. Ken was stiff. Sarah realized the women's rights stuff could scare him off, so for a minute they were both silent until Ken almost shouted, "Look at me being rude. Let's get you started with a drink." Ken did not read the internet beyond checking sports and news headlines. He was busy. He subscribed to the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times after an advisor talked him into investing in solar and electric vehicles. But then after 2 weeks, he deleted them off his phone and forgot all about them. He ran a logistics company that dominated the East Coast markets. Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills. Well, until 3 years ago, when a rival came out of nowhere and almost crushed him. They'd been operating on razor-thin margins since. Who knew shipping containers could be so cutthroat? It was a hefty responsibility, ensuring the livelihood of nearly 300 employees. But, he reassured Sarah, he was aware of his privilege. He was still in a better position in life than most people. No complaints, really. Ken's grin further put Sarah in her place. "Ah, yes, yes," she said, snapping to her senses. "No complaints here either." She waved one suggestive hand in the air. She'd gone to the nail salon just the day before. "Well, the upside to quitting my job is that I can catch some beauty sleep now and go to the gym, get my nails done, that sort of thing." Ken perked up a little. "How long are you still in school for?" he asked. "Grad school," Sarah corrected him. "Another year." "I'm familiar with students," Ken said. "You have passion. You have needs." "Mm-hmm." Sarah kept the smile glued on her face. "What kind of workouts do you like to do?" Ken asked. "I once dated a Pilates instructor. Great butt. The bodybuilders, on the other hand." Without giving Sarah a chance to respond, Ken added that he had no intention of changing his married life. He just needed a little bit of attention on the side. It's one of those cliches, isn't it? Get married for long enough, and you'll see. He flashed an apologetic smile. Oh, and he was very sorry to have to say something that went without saying, but just to be clear, he was only looking for casual. Is that cool? Sarah could not tell at first if Ken was serious. Did he really think she wanted anything more? She was about to rebut with a stern remark, but Ken went on before she could gather her thoughts. I'm gonna wrap up here. Thanks.
Thank you, Grace. Our next reader this evening, originally from Kampala, Uganda, please welcome to the virtual stage, Ruth Mukwana.
Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to read from my short story, Taboo. The full moon and sparkling stars make it easy to trail path. As we walk through the maze of shacks in forgotten camp, our footsteps in sync. A few times I step on tins, plastic bags, and fear he has heard us, but he doesn't stop. As we cross the valley into the forest, he becomes one with the darkness. The voices from his radio, interposed with music, guide us for a while before he switches it off and immediately disappears. My stomach grumbles and my heart pounds. I think the sound of my breathing is someone else's, and imagine invisible eyes watching us. "Ma," I tug at her clothes. "We are walking in circles," I whisper. "Shut up," she says and sits down. An owl cries. "Bad luck," she whispers. "Maybe we should go back." "Ma, what now?" "What's that flickering red dot?" "I think someone is smoking. Stay here," she says as she gets up. I don't. Much later, I will wish I had listened to her. I follow her as she walks like a lion hunting. I think she has done this before. She doesn't make any sound. I smell cigarettes before I hear voices, before I see anyone. We are on our stomachs before a spot, covered out in the forest under a large baobab tree. It's concealed by the tree branches that kiss the soil. The gaps between the leaves and branches are stitched with leaves from other trees. A torch is lit every few minutes. I can't tell how many people are squatting or sitting under the tree. I see children, men, and women. I see Pa. He has his gun. He decides who speaks. I see a woman on her knees, her hands tied above her head, her mouth and eyes covered. I see men holding guns. I see men without shirts. I hear them say, boss, please, let us have our way with her. Pa pushes her towards one of the men. The man grabs her, he rips off her clothes. He climbs on top of her, she screams. Pa shouts at her to stop, she doesn't. He raises his gun. Father, I shout as a shot is fired. Ma reaches out and covers my mouth. It's too late, they've had us. Torchlight shines in our faces. I think Pa is shouting at us, but I'm too scared to make out anything. I hear screaming. I'm trembling like I have fever. Ma is also shuddering. There are tears. The forest is death. I don't hear the birds fly away to somewhere safe. I don't see the children vomit. I don't see that they've covered their eyes. I don't hear them cry. I hear a voice shout, run, and we are running and running and running and don't stop, even when we stumble or collide into trees, until we are inside our house. Ma secures the weak wooden door and windows as though whoever she's locking out can't break them with a simple kick, as though she can lock Pa out. She listens. The only sound is our wheezing. She guides me to the bed but doesn't say anything until our breathing is normal. Oh, Queen, why didn't you listen to me? I told you to stay behind. Pa, he shot the woman. It's dark. I can't see her face, but I know her eyes are on me. Did you see Ma? He shot her. No, he didn't shoot her. Ma, Pa, he shot her. The woman, he shot her. He shot her. He didn't. He fired into the air. He shot her. Queen, I've told you he didn't. Can you listen for once? She raises her voice. A torrent of tears in my eyes. I don't think about why she's not shocked, why she's telling me to forget. I don't hear the panic and fear in her voice. He shot her. He shot her, I shout. She holds my shoulders and shakes me. Can you listen, Queen? I've told you he didn't. If you say it again, God help me. Her voice is loud, and she continues to shake me until I scream, yes, Ma, yes, Ma. I'm sorry, Queen, she says and stops shaking me. She reaches out and puts my head in her lap. It's okay, Queen. It is okay. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault, my fault. I shouldn't have taken you to the forest. I just don't want you to talk about this again. Erase it away. You didn't see anything, okay? She lifts my chest, holds my head, and rubs the tears from my eyes with her fingers. She holds me tightly to her chest. She's crying. I know it's very bad because Ma never, ever says sorry to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. We're going to go back out to the Midwest, originally from state of Michigan. Please welcome our next reader, Claire Oleson.
Hi, I am from the Midwest. I'm a queer writer from the Midwest, very shockingly reading from a queer novel manuscript that is set in the Midwest. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm starting part of the way through with a character introduction of an adjunct professor who is also a retired park ranger working at a small college in rural Michigan. The manuscript is called New Animals. Beck Simmel hit age 57 without much notice. Her hair had gone chalk white starting in her 30s, skipping gray entirely. She'd let it yellow since, like discarded ivory, like tusks found in the mud after a body had melted away from them. She was just 4 inches shy of 7 feet, and she felt impossible a great deal of the time. It wouldn't be until winter that Beck bothered with the shotgun again. On the corner of the field-lined highway for roadkill, one quick slam through the skull of a fawn with 4 broken legs. She picked it up after. She lifted it out from its bed in the gathering snowbank, anticipating all of its cold limpness, all of its density, until it burst expectation and nearly made her scream. After the first blasted head, which she'd ruined as fast and as painlessly as anything could, Beck saw a second drooping face pull from the frozen white. It hung like a loose wasp's nest. She could see it now, the neck split into 2 paths, the sets of final vertebrae ending in the shock of a face she'd never thought could be there. A fawn in the winter was already a terrible idea. A 2-headed fawn along the highway in December in Michigan's Upper Peninsula had to be unforgivable to someone or something somewhere. Beck picked a blanket to ruin. She laid the bleeding body on her lap, not willing to toss it into the truck bed where flakes would coat it further, would dew its eyelashes, would cover the open corneas with ghost after ghost of snow. She wanted to name it, now that it was remarkable. She wanted to name it twice. She was looking at it every moment the road felt safe enough to look away from. She shouldn't have been looking away at all, given the ice, given that her sister had done this before dying herself, that is, driving badly. The fawn did nothing. The fawn was dead. There was no choice but to carry it in like an infant. She had killed things in Colorado, as a ranger at Mesa Verde, and then at Rocky Mountain National Park, but they had to be irrevocably hurt, had to be past help, some screaming, some in the descending haze of passing out and away on their own. If it could be approached and was wild, it would need significant help, or it would need out of its life, need a bright door. Beck hated the shotgun. She liked to think of it only as a way of making doors. The fawn had made her button down go crimson across the chest. What she wanted was a big glass tank of formaldehyde. What she wanted was to suspend it forever at the top of the staircase, its crushed face and its full one tilted up, even in the dark, even when no one was home. What she did was go to the backyard by the forest edge. She laid her coat down and set the baby on top of it. It ruined the fabric like she'd ruined half of its brains. She had seen it shaking and straining. She had looked down at its tire-crushed ankles, knew how the bone splinters had scattered into muscle like flecks of wrong snow. It took hours to work at the frozen ground to dig a grave. She had to go back in for a large flashlight to bathe the area, but the ground was clear of roots and stones. The dirt here had been moved before. Beck liked to assume the evacuated earth remembered her, remembered having been displaced. At 4 feet she stopped. She stopped before she hit anything else and she laid the fawn down. Absolutely, she should have given it to the bio department of the college, should have said something to the county, but it was either going to be hers in a gleaming tank, set perfect and still like an octopus with its ribbons of limbs floating in a dream, or it would be nothing, nothing she'd ever found. Clearly the driver had kept driving, had abandoned it too. She tamped the dirt. The animal was gone. She named it in her head. 2 names, December 7th. She named it for how far it had gotten. It was insane to get that far with 2 heads as an animal. It was something that didn't happen. When things like that were born in the woods, the day they could see the trees was usually the day they stopped seeing anything at all. Beck tossed new fallen snow over the grave with the shovel. 2 feet below, December 7th, a gathering of other bones was freezing to itself in a series of false joints, as it did each winter with a religious dedication. Beck's sister's stillborn, which first came into sight in the house she was walking back to, had one malformed skull and no name that either of them had ever felt was worth saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Our next reader, originally from Recife, Brazil, please welcome Camila Santos.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. I'll be reading from a short story called Blurring Blue on White. Marisa is a young single mother living in Brazil, in Rio, and she's contemplating embarking on a loveless marriage with an American so that she can have her daughter back in her care. The daughter lives with Marisa's sister in a different city. The next day, she overslept, missing her chance to call Sabrina, who was already at school. Lately, when she called, Sabrina seemed more interested in playing with the neighbors' children or watching cartoons than in taking her call. How long until Sabrina forgot all about her and came to regard Marisa simply as a picture or a voice over the telephone? It had only been a couple of months since they last saw each other. But for an 8-year-old, she thought, a couple of months was an eternity. Marisa had only been able to visit her daughter so many times this year because Alan had gifted her the tickets to Recife. Of course, once she got off the plane, Sabrina ran into her arms, followed her around like a puppy dog, kissing Marisa's face over and over and calling her the most beautiful, the loveliest, and the best mother in the world. And so, as she got ready to go to work, she whispered those words to herself, as if they were a secret spell or a powerful prayer. Her building was on a mostly residential street, but once she walked against the flow of traffic towards Avenida Atlântica, she was surrounded by the bustle of Copacabana. Motorcycles, cars, and pale yellow cabs weaved in and out of the lanes, competing for space with the buses filled with passengers. In the botecos, men wearing Speedos sipped ice-cold choppies, licking off the foam from their upper lips. An older woman walking a fluffy dog waited her turn in front of a coconut cart. As Marisa reached the beach, a strip of water sparkled blue and green, the sun so bright the air seemed to shimmer in the white light. She preferred to walk on the right side of Avenida Atlântica, beneath the shade of the tall residential buildings. On the left, past the coconut trees and yellow kiosks, past the volleyball nets and popsicle vendors, a mass of bodies lying on colorful cangas glistened with sweat and suntan lotion. Further ahead on the sidewalk, a little girl around Sabrina's age, feet caked in sand, licked a popsicle as she held hands with a woman dressed entirely in white, the uniform instantly giving her away as the girl's nanny. "Finish that popsicle here, Juju," she overheard the woman saying to the girl. "And we need to rinse those feet before I can take you back upstairs. You don't want your mommy getting upset with sand all over her living room." Marisa felt an irrational anger at this mother and would do anything to trade places with her. But even if she were able to afford a nanny, she'd never stay inside on such a beautiful afternoon doing God knows what. She'd put on a bathing suit, give the nanny a day off, and take her daughter to the beach. Last year, her sister sent Sabrina down to Rio for a visit, a present for the girl's 7th birthday. Sabrina was excited by the plane ride, and she marveled at the size of Marisa's apartment, claiming to Alicia over the phone that "Mommy lives in a dollhouse." And when they'd gone to the beach, as soon as Sabrina got to her feet in the water and felt the temperature of the ocean, she refused to go in. "Why is the water so cold, Mommy?" She was wearing a blue 2-piece swimsuit patterned with gold stars. Marisa had helped her pick it out at a street fair near her apartment. "It's not like that back home," she complained. "Well, we're further south and it's colder here," Marisa explained. "This beach sucks," and Sabrina plopped down on the sand, arms crossed, her round belly sticking out. She looked like an adorable angry Buddha, and Marisa had wished that she could freeze time so she could keep Sabrina as a 7-year-old forever. "I want to see people's reaction when you, Missy," and she tickled Sabrina. "State your opinion about one of the most famous beaches in the world." Sabrina squealed in delight, allowing herself to be pulled into the water. And so she'd held her daughter's hand as they floated, following the cadence of silvery blue waves rolling under their bodies, the water cresting white and breaking onto the shore. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. Up next, another native New Yorker coming to the virtual stage, originally from Queens, New York. Please welcome Sasha von Oldershausen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just gonna dive right in. The road to far west Texas is rambling, which is to say there's no easy way to get there, no matter where you're coming from. There is a train, the Sunset Limited, that occasionally goes there. The Sunset Limited sounds much lovelier than it is. Maybe it was once. It runs from New Orleans to Los Angeles and back, cutting through Texas 3 days out of the week. The entire journey one way takes 48 hours, and nearly half that journey happens in the state of Texas. I tell you this in case you've forgotten how big Texas is, or in case you never knew. It's my first visit to West Texas and my first visit to Texas. I mean to say they're not really the same thing. My plan is to fly to San Antonio first, where I'll catch the train, the Sunset Limited, to Alpine. That's another 8-hour journey. Like I said, there's no easy way of getting there, and this is especially true if you don't drive, which I don't. The waiting room of the Amtrak station is bathed in a buzzing white light. The plexiglass shelves affixed to the wall are stuffed with a pile of pamphlets that bend at the middle like they've been standing for a decade too long. In a corner, the gumball machines are half full of candy, hard as gravel and made to resemble miniature fruit, candy that seems to no longer exist anywhere else except in places like these, places where you wait, train stations, laundromats, car shops. There is a community of smokers who step outside every half hour or so and huddle near a street lamp, as though the spill of its dim glow might warm them. It's March and the desert nights are cold. I didn't pack for this. I didn't know. For a moment, I contemplate joining them, these smokers, but they're a rambunctious group with cavernous, emphysemic laughs. And besides, I'm not a real smoker. I syncopate my own smoke breaks outside their 30-minute increments and stand outside the pool of light's edge where no one can see me. Inside again, I clutch my backpack for warmth and struggle to stay awake until I meet Blaze, an 18-year-old oil rig worker. I have no idea what it means to work on an oil rig. A couple of years later, after I've lived in West Texas for some time, I will know more about pipelines than I'd ever dreamed. I will learn to love the perpetual bob of the rig scattering the landscape of my long drives. I will learn to drive. When I see them for the first time, I'll think they resemble those drinking bird toys, the way they lean back and forth and tip their beaks into the pool of liquid. Blaze is big and soft with blonde hair and has the smooth, beardless face of a young boy. He speaks slowly, deliberately. He wants to tell me what he does for work and shows me photos of his 2 trucks on his phone like they're his nieces. Trucks figure as currency in the West, though I will also learn this later. At the moment, though, it seems strange to me. One is red, the other is white. Maybe they're Chevys or Fords. American. I'm not really paying attention. He asks my name and where I'm from. New York City, Blaze shouts back at me, and several bleary-eyed people look up. I regret telling him. What are you doing in Texas? I have a job interview. What do you do? He asks. I'm a journalist, I say, and a mystified expression washes over his face, looking something, I imagine, like mine did when he mentioned the rigs. He changes the subject. He tells me I've got pretty eyes. I must hear that often. I smile mildly and avert my gaze. Well, do you? He asks. Do I what? Do you hear it a lot, that you've got pretty eyes? I don't know how to answer that question. I open my mouth to say something, but nothing comes. I rub my face. Vaguely, I think, I'm so tired. His expression suddenly darkens. I guess that's the New York in you, he says. Here in Texas, we say please and thank you. Sorry, I say. We lapse into silence. I tighten my grip around my bag. After a moment, Blaze starts up again. What color are they anyway? You can see them better than I can, I imagine saying to him, and absently feel for my cigarettes in the front pocket of my jacket. The loud smokers have just returned from outside. I check the clock on the wall. Now it's my turn. Green, I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. And last but not least, our final reader for the evening, completing our Midwest trifecta. From Chicago, Illinois, please welcome Rachel Wolff.
Thank you. And thank you to my peers. It's been such a pleasure hearing everyone. I am reading from my novel in progress, which is called The Offspring. It's a ghost story that takes place in the art world in New York and Germany, but this excerpt is pre-ghost. The first artwork Mara ever loved was a drawing Dina made when Mara was 9 and Dina was 10. It lived on a sliver of wall underneath their shared bunk bed, and in it, Dina conjured the entire world. It started conspiratorially. The girls often met under their bed late at night, and a few weeks after Mara had told Dina about her namesake, Dina asked what other stories Mara knew from her Jewish school. Dina knew some of the stories from the holidays, but confessed that she didn't remember them exactly, and Mara relished in regaling her older sister with all the things she'd not only learned, but deeply believed, from creation to the flood, the smashed idols, the woman of salt, the wrestling angel, the burning bush, the parted sea, Esther saving all the Jews from Haman, Jonah in the belly of the whale. To that point, Mara's affinity for religion had run exactly counter to Dina's affinity for art. Even at its peak, Mara understood her faith to be reactive, something she'd clung to and cultivated as Dina's talents had emerged, which isn't to say she wasn't a true believer. She was. When their parents sent them to different schools so they might achieve in different ways, Dina to the art school, Mara to the Jewish school, Mara had taken it immediately as a sign. She devoted herself to God and the stories and rituals early. She liked God and liked that in the context of her family of mostly secular Jews, she saw him as her own. She would talk to him in her mind when she was sad or lonely, or when she and her parents, or she and Dina, or she and the kids at school got into fights. She liked the idea that God could hear all and see all, especially when she felt she'd been wronged. This prompt for other stories was the first time Dina had expressed true interest in Mara's education. And as Dina kept asking for stories in their convenings under the bed, Mara started spending her days in school preparing, asking questions, committing every detail she could to memory, while also trying to obscure from her sister the lengths to which she was going to prepare. After a week of this, Dina met Mara under the bed with a set of colored pencils and a flashlight she propped up on one of their mother's thick books to illuminate the stretch of white wall between the floor and the bottom beam of the bunk. She pushed the ends of Mara's bed sheets up to clear her canvas, then told her, "Okay, go." Mara did, and Dina responded on the wall, working small but furiously, often eschewing fidelity and perfection, only rarely telling Mara to pause or slow down. Mara had, of course, seen Dina draw before, tongue out a little, fully absorbed, gripping whatever crayon or marker she was using in a tight fist, while she faithfully rendered their dolls, their toys, pictures from books and magazines, and various other things around the house. But Mara had never seen her work in quite this way, working from nothing, looking at nothing, listening to the stories and drawing them back. They focused just on the creation that first night, as Mara recalled every detail she could remember, then went back and added more as Dina went back and added to her work. They kept at this for weeks, for a few hours every night, happy, close, Mara yielding to her sister's process and her sister's vision, but participating in it too, seeing the substance and enthusiasm in her storytelling reflected back almost one-to-one. She was understanding more about Dina and more about herself, feeling not just useful, but necessary, maybe even interesting, maybe even inspiring. Until one Saturday morning, Mara woke up with a start to daylight piercing the blinds and realized she'd slept fully through the night. She belly crawled under the bed and saw that Dina had worked without her, elaborating on certain stories and forms, adding figures that looked like they were from the present or possibly the future, definitely not the book. Mara moved close to the surface and ran her fingers along the parts Dina changed. They were obvious to her immediately, as she knew every inch of what they'd made together by heart. The drawing had become tighter and denser by nature of where it sat on the wall, but also because of everything Dina had added to it. People were now growing out of other people's heads, armpits, and butts, and out of the snake in the garden's mouth. There were picnickers in Eden and a swing set and slide, and the tree of knowledge, which just yesterday had only apples, now bore light bulbs and party streamers and pizza slices too. There were little blue men on Noah's Ark with the animals and skyscrapers floating around them in the flood. There were flowers on the pyramids, TV sets in the desert, basketballs raining down from the sky as a plague with the frogs. The matriarchs had multiplied. Some had side ponytails. Joseph had a skateboard. The angels all had bikes. Then there was God, heard and seen and drawn by Dina at his every mention as an old hippie, even though Mara had told Dina that you weren't supposed to draw God at all. God was still a hippie, still wearing a tunic and blue jeans with long hair and a long beard, but God was womanly now too, part Adam, part Eve, in a way that suddenly seemed real and true, so why hadn't she thought of it first? Mara ground her face into the carpet. She tried to see God and talk to God, but all she saw was Dina's work and Dina's God, and so she stayed like this, face pressed to the floor, body flat but tense, until her breathing steadied and her cheeks were chafed but dry. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, fellows, for these beautiful readings tonight. That was amazing. That was fantastic. I think you've left the audience wanting more. So this concludes our reading for the evening. Thank you everyone for joining us here tonight to celebrate, I think, what's only the beginning for these writers. I'm sure you'll be hearing from them for years to come. I just wanted to leave you guys with a few brief announcements. First of all, speaking of readings and from our fellows, their anthology just came out not too long ago. We produce an anthology every year for every fellowship cohort. So we will let you know soon how you can purchase a copy of the anthology. All proceeds from the sale of the anthology goes towards funding the fellowship. I also want to let you know that the second and final reading by our fellows will be in early October. Once we've set a date, we will definitely let you know. And last but not least, the 2021 fellowship application for anyone out there who is interested in applying opens up on May 1st and closes May 30th. So that information is up on our website. If you're interested, please check it out, apply, and become part of the experience. Thank you all for joining us here tonight again. And fellas, again, thank you for your work. That was quite a treat. Good night, everyone, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.